Blood dripped from Zara Washington's split lip as she stood victorious in the airport terminal. The grounded flight behind her, hundreds of passengers staring in disbelief. The flight attendant's career destroyed with one recording. Sometimes, justice comes at 35,000 feet above ground. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination and wanted to see justice served. Let's explore how one brave teenager stood up against discrimination and changed an entire airline industry forever. Zara Washington stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her crisp white blouse. At 17, her bright brown eyes held the determination of someone twice her age. She tucked a strand of her natural curly hair behind her ear and took a deep breath. Today marked the culmination of 4 years of relentless work, a full scholarship to Princeton University, and an invitation to present her medical device prototype at the National Youth Science Innovation competition in San Francisco. "Zara, honey, you're going to miss your flight if you don't hurry," her mother called from downstairs. Vanessa Washington had raised Zara alone since her husband died when Zara was just 5 years old. As a hospital administrator working 60-hour weeks, Vanessa had sacrificed everything to provide her daughter with opportunities she never had. Their modest Atlanta home was filled with Zara's academic achievements, certificates, medals, and trophies that told the story of a brilliant, young mind. "Coming, Mom," Zara called back, carefully placing her prototype's technical drawings in a protective folder. The device, a portable diagnostic tool designed specifically for rural communities with limited healthcare access, represented months of research and development. Mr. Reynolds, her white science teacher and one of the few allies she had at Westlake High School, had been instrumental in helping her refine the concept. Downstairs, Vanessa was packing snacks into Zara's carry-on bag. "Did you double-check your presentation materials?" she asked, her eyes reflecting both pride and anxiety. "Triple-checked," Zara replied, patting her laptop bag. "Everything's backed up in 3 different places, just like you taught me." Vanessa smiled, but Zara could see the worry lines around her mother's eyes. They both knew what this trip meant. Not just for Zara's future, but potentially for thousands of people who could benefit from her innovation. If she won the competition, major medical technology companies would be looking to develop her prototype. "I wish I could come with you," Vanessa said, straightening Zara's collar. "This stupid hospital budget meeting." "Mom, it's okay," Zara assured her. "This is your big promotion opportunity. Besides, I'm 17. I can handle a flight by myself." What Zara didn't say was how nervous she actually felt. This would be her first time flying alone, and her first time in first class, a luxury included in her competition prize package. She had experienced enough prejudice in her young life to know that spaces of privilege weren't always welcoming to people who looked like her. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Tiana, Zara's best friend since kindergarten, who had insisted on coming over before Zara left. "Girl, you're going to kill it in San Francisco," Tiana exclaimed, pulling Zara into a tight hug. "I brought you something." She pulled out a small box containing a handmade bracelet woven with threads of blue and gold, Princeton's colors. "For good luck," Tiana said, tying it around Zara's wrist. "So you remember where you're headed. No matter what happens." The gesture brought unexpected tears to Zara's eyes. "Thank you. I'll wear it during my presentation." Before they left for the airport, Mr. Reynolds called for a last-minute coaching session. "Remember, Zara," his voice crackled through the phone speaker, "your research is solid. Your prototype works. Don't let anyone intimidate you." His words reminded her of the countless times the school administration had tried to downplay her achievements or attribute them to diversity initiatives rather than her actual brilliance. Even winning the regional science fair had come with whispers that she had only won because the judges wanted to appear inclusive. "I won't, Mr. Reynolds," she promised. "I've worked too hard to get here." The drive to Atlanta International Airport was filled with Vanessa's last-minute advice and reminders. When they finally arrived at the departures terminal, her mother pulled her into a fierce hug. "You call me the minute you land," Vanessa instructed. "And remember what I always tell you. Stand tall and never let them see you break. Zara finished. It was the mantra that had carried them both through countless difficult moments. As Zara walked through the airport security checkpoint, she sent quick texts to both her mother and Tiana. The reality of traveling alone to represent not just herself, but her school, her community, and young black scientists everywhere settled on her shoulders. The weight was heavy, but her steps remained steady as she headed toward her gate, unaware that the journey ahead would test her in ways no science competition ever could. Zara approached gate B23 with her boarding pass clutched tightly in her hand. The attendant announced that first-class passengers could begin boarding, and Zara stepped forward, presenting her ticket with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "First class?" the gate agent asked, raising an eyebrow as she scanned the boarding pass. Her tone held a note of disbelief that made Zara's stomach tighten. "Yes, it's part of my prize package for the science competition," Zara explained, though she knew she didn't owe anyone an explanation. The gate agent reluctantly handed back her boarding pass. "All right then, enjoy your flight." Zara walked down the jet bridge, mentally rehearsing her presentation as she approached the plane's entrance. A flight attendant with a perfect blonde, updo and a name tag reading Heather Caldwell greeted passengers at the door. "Welcome aboard," Heather said to the older white gentleman ahead of Zara. When Zara stepped forward, Heather's smile faltered. "Boarding pass, please." Zara handed over her ticket, which Heather examined with suspicious scrutiny. "You're in first class?" Heather asked loudly, attracting the attention of nearby passengers. "Yes," Zara replied, keeping her voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Heather inspected the boarding pass again. "These mix-ups happen all the time," she said, more to the passengers behind Zara than to Zara herself. "Let me double-check this." "There's no mix-up," Zara insisted, conscious of the line forming behind her. "It's a valid first-class ticket." A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit sighed impatiently. "Some of us have connections to make," he commented, checking his Rolex. After what felt like an eternity, Heather reluctantly returned the boarding pass. "Seat 3A, window seat on the left." Zara made her way to her seat, aware of the eyes following her. The first-class cabin was less than half full, with plush leather seats and ample legroom. She stored her laptop bag carefully in the overhead compartment before sliding into her window seat. An older white woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair occupied the aisle seat next to her. As Zara settled in, the woman, whose designer handbag proclaimed wealth and status, clutched her purse tighter and shifted slightly away. Zara pretended not to notice, focusing instead on retrieving her presentation notes from her personal bag. She had learned early that sometimes the best response to microaggressions was to excel visibly. The middle-aged businessman who had been behind her in line took the seat across the aisle. His name, she soon learned from Heather's effusive greeting, was Richard Bennett, apparently a frequent flyer with the airline. "Can I get you a pre-flight beverage, Mr. Bennett?" Heather asked, her customer service voice notably warmer than it had been with Zara. "Scotch, neat," he replied without looking up from his phone. Heather proceeded to offer drinks to every first-class passenger, somehow skipping over Zara entirely. The older woman beside her received a glass of white wine with a warm smile from Heather. The pattern continued as Heather distributed hot towels and took meal preferences from the first-class passengers. Each time she managed to act as if Zara's seat were empty or somehow not worthy of the same service. Zara thought back to her mother's advice about picking battles wisely. Was this worth confronting, or should she just focus on her presentation? Her thoughts were interrupted when the older woman beside her accidentally knocked over her wine, splashing a few drops onto Zara's notes. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," the woman exclaimed, reaching for a napkin. "It's okay," Zara assured her, quickly protecting her papers. "No harm done." The interaction seemed to soften something in the woman's demeanor. "I'm Caroline Fletcher," she offered, her southern accent gentle. "Zara Washington," Zara replied with a polite smile. Their brief exchange was interrupted when Zara finally decided to request the service she was entitled to. "Excuse me," she called to Heather, who was passing with a tray of drinks. "Could I please have some water?" Heather stopped and turned slowly. "This seat's not for you," she said loudly, her voice carrying throughout the first-class cabin. "I'll need to see your boarding pass again." Zara felt her cheeks burn as conversations around them halted. "I already showed it to you at the door," she said, struggling to keep her voice even. "And again when I boarded." "Well, there must be some mistake," Heather insisted. "These seats are premium class." The implication hung in the air, clear as day. Someone like Zara couldn't possibly belong in first class legitimately. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her pocket and produced her boarding pass for the third time. "Here it is again," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Seat 3A, first class." Heather snatched the ticket, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny, while several passengers watched the interaction unfold. Her lips tightened into a thin line when she couldn't find any discrepancy. "Well, this is highly unusual," Heather muttered, reluctantly handing back the boarding pass. Richard Bennett, the businessman across the aisle, cleared his throat loudly. "You know," he said to no one in particular, though his voice carried deliberately, "these people should really be seated in economy. First class has certain standards." The casual cruelty of his statement landed like a physical blow. Zara gripped the armrests of her seat, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Never let them see you break." Throughout the cabin, reactions varied. Some passengers suddenly became very interested in their magazines or phones, avoiding eye contact. Others watched with uncomfortable fascination. A few shook their heads in disapproval. Though whether at Heather's behavior or at Zara's presence wasn't clear, the plane's intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Davis Miller speaking. We're just waiting for final clearance from the tower, and then we'll be on our way to San Francisco. Flight time today will be approximately 4 hours and 50 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure." As the announcement ended, Zara discreetly pulled out her phone and opened the recording app. Her hands were steady now, purpose replacing anxiety. She'd learned from experience that documentation was sometimes the only defense against denial. Later, Heather returned, this time with a security officer in tow. "This passenger is causing a disturbance," she informed the officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut. "She's refusing to show proper documentation for this seating area." "That's absolutely false," Zara stated firmly. "I've shown my boarding pass 3 times now. I have a legitimate first-class ticket." A second security officer, a younger man with a more sympathetic expression, joined them. "What seems to be the problem here?" "There's no problem with my ticket," Zara explained, holding it out to him. "I've been asked repeatedly to verify my seat assignment, which I've done multiple times, and I'm still being harassed." The first officer frowned. "Young lady, no one is harassing you. The flight attendant is just doing her job." "By repeatedly questioning only me?" Zara challenged. "She hasn't asked anyone else to verify their seat assignment even once." The tension in the cabin was palpable now. A middle-aged black woman from the other side of first class stood up. "I've been watching this whole thing," she announced. "This young lady is right. She's being singled out." Richard Bennett scoffed. "Oh, here we go, always playing the race card." But to Zara's surprise, Caroline Fletcher beside her also spoke up. "I've been sitting right here," she said, her southern accent more pronounced with emotion. "This young woman has done nothing wrong. She's been polite despite being treated quite poorly." "Is this situation familiar to you? Have you ever been questioned about belonging somewhere you had every right to be?" Comment number 1 if you think Zara should stand her ground, or number 2 if you think she should just try to avoid conflict. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see how this confrontation unfolds. Would you have started recording like Zara did? Let's see what happens next. The confrontation was reaching a critical point when Zara's phone rang. It was her mother. Without breaking eye contact with Heather, Zara answered. "Mom, I'm having a situation on the plane," she explained calmly. "What kind of situation?" Vanessa's voice was instantly alert. "The flight attendant doesn't seem to believe I belong in first class. She's called security." Vanessa Washington's voice changed, taking on the authoritative tone Zara recognized from when her mother dealt with difficult hospital board members. "Put the flight attendant on the phone, now," Zara held out her phone. "My mother would like to speak with you." Heather looked taken aback but took the phone with obvious reluctance. "This is Flight Attendant Caldwell." Zara couldn't hear her mother's exact words, but Heather's face grew increasingly uncomfortable. "Yes, ma'am." "No, ma'am. That wasn't my intention." "I understand." By the time Heather handed the phone back, her face was flushed. The younger security officer was reviewing Zara's boarding pass and comparing it to the manifest on his tablet. "Everything checks out," he confirmed. "Ms. Washington is correctly assigned to seat 3A. The first officer looked disgruntled but nodded. "All right then. Let's all settle down so this flight can depart." As the security officers retreated, the tension in the cabin remained. Zara could feel her heart pounding but kept her expression neutral. She had won this round, but the flight to San Francisco suddenly felt much longer than 5 hours. America but rarely received justice. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit, his authoritative presence immediately commanding attention. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing that came with thousands of hours in the air. "What's the situation here?" he asked, his gaze moving between Heather and Zara. Before Heather could speak, Caroline interjected. "This young lady has been repeatedly asked to verify her first-class ticket, Captain. 3 times now when no one else has been questioned." "Once." The captain turned to Zara. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Zara handed it over, watching carefully as he examined it. Unlike Heather's suspicious scrutiny, the captain's review was professional and brief. "Everything appears to be in order," he confirmed, returning the boarding pass to Zara. He turned to Heather with a stern expression. "Miss Caldwell, a word please." They moved to the galley area, but Zara could still hear fragments of the captain's quiet but firm reprimand. Completely unacceptable. Airline policy. Diversity training. When Heather returned, her face was tight with suppressed anger. "I apologize for the inconvenience," she said to Zara, the words coming out stiff and insincere. "Would you like a beverage before takeoff?" "Water, please," Zara replied simply. As Heather walked away, Captain Miller addressed Zara directly. "Ms. Washington, I apologize for this unfortunate incident. Please let me know if you experience any further issues during the flight." With the immediate crisis averted, the pre-flight preparations resumed. The plane began its taxi toward the runway, and Zara felt a momentary relief. She discreetly sent a text to Tiana before switching her phone to airplane mode. "Made it on board. Almost got kicked off for flying while black. Story of my life. Call you when I land." Caroline leaned over slightly. "I'm sorry about what happened," she said quietly. "It was wrong." Zara nodded in acknowledgement, unsure if she could trust this sudden alliance. As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky, she gazed out the window at Atlanta growing smaller below. The confrontation had left her drained, yet she couldn't fully relax. Her mind drifted back to junior year, when she'd been the only black student selected for the Advanced Science Symposium at Georgia Tech. Upon arrival, the coordinator had assumed she was lost and tried to direct her to a different event for disadvantaged youth happening in another building. She hadn't spoken up then, had simply produced her invitation letter and endured the coordinator's surprise and half-hearted apology. Her silence that day had haunted her for months afterward. Never again, she had promised herself. Next time, I'll stand my ground. Today, she had kept that promise. Midway through the flight, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began moving about the cabin. Zara remained in her seat, reviewing her presentation notes. From her position, she could hear Heather talking with another flight attendant, Jessica, in the galley just behind first class. "Can you believe the attitude?" Heather's voice carried despite her attempt to keep it low, acting like she belongs here, playing the victim. "It's always the same with them," Jessica replied. "So entitled these days. The captain totally undermined my authority. 20 years flying, and now I have to treat everyone with kid gloves, because they might claim discrimination." Zara kept her eyes on her notes, her face betraying nothing, though her heart raced with indignation. She turned slightly to see Caroline's reaction and found the older woman looking at her with an expression of genuine sympathy. "I can hear them too," Caroline whispered. "And I want you to know. I'm ashamed of how I reacted when you first sat down." Zara raised an eyebrow, surprised by the candid admission. "I clutched my purse," Caroline continued, her voice low with regret. "It was automatic, and it was wrong. I've been working on unlearning behaviors I was raised with in rural Georgia, but clearly I still have a ways to go." The unexpected honesty caught Zara off guard. "Thank you for saying that," she replied after a moment. "And thank you for speaking up earlier." "My granddaughter's about your age," Caroline said. "I'd be heartbroken if someone treated her the way that flight attendant treated you." I couldn't stay silent. Their conversation was interrupted by mild turbulence that caused the plane to shudder. The seatbelt sign dinged back on, and Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, we're hitting a bit of rough air as we cross over some weather systems. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened until we're through this patch." Zara secured her seatbelt and tried to return to her notes, feeling slightly better about the situation. Caroline had proved to be an unexpected ally, and Captain Miller had handled the initial confrontation appropriately. Perhaps the worst was behind her, and she could focus on preparing for the competition. As the plane bounced through pockets of turbulent air, she didn't notice Heather's calculated glance in her direction, or the subtle nod exchanged between Heather and Richard Bennett. The temporary calm was just that. Temporary. The real storm was yet to come. An hour later, the seatbelt sign had been off for some time, and the first-class cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. Heather announced that meal service would begin shortly, and Zara carefully arranged her tray table, moving her presentation materials to make room while keeping them organized. When Heather approached with the meal cart, she served Richard Bennett first, then worked her way methodically through the cabin. She placed Caroline's meal with professional efficiency, then turned to Zara with a tight smile. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked, her voice overly sweet. "Chicken, please," Zara replied, maintaining eye contact. As Heather leaned forward to place the tray, her hand slipped, sending a cup of steaming hot coffee cascading directly onto Zara's lap and presentation materials. Zara jumped up with a startled cry as the scalding liquid soaked through her clothes and splashed onto her laptop and prototype diagrams. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," Heather exclaimed, her voice dripping with false concern. "The turbulence must have caught me off balance." There had been no turbulence. The air was perfectly still, and both Zara and Caroline knew it. "That was deliberate," Caroline snapped, already reaching for napkins to help Zara. Zara grabbed her laptop, turning it upside down immediately to drain the coffee away from the electronic components. Her carefully annotated diagrams were soaked, the ink beginning to run as the coffee spread across the pages. "You did that on purpose," Zara said, her voice shaking with restrained anger. "That's a serious accusation," Heather replied coldly. "It was clearly an accident due to air turbulence." From across the aisle, Richard Bennett smirked. "Maybe if you hadn't been causing trouble earlier, the flight attendant wouldn't be so nervous around you." Zara ignored him, assessing the damage. With growing horror, her laptop screen was flickering and coffee had seeped into the keyboard. The prototype diagrams, containing months of detailed work and measurements, were stained beyond legibility. "I need to try to save my work," she said to Caroline, grabbing her laptop and rushing to the bathroom at the front of the first-class cabin. Inside the tiny lavatory, Zara used paper towels to carefully blot her computer, fighting back tears of frustration. She tried turning on the laptop, but the screen remained black. Pressing the power button again resulted in a brief flash before it died completely. Her clothes were stained with coffee, her prototype diagrams ruined, and her laptop, containing all her presentation files, was likely destroyed. The backup files were with Mr. Reynolds, but without Wi-Fi access on the plane, she had no way to retrieve them. When Zara returned to her seat, she found that Heather had made a minimal effort to clean up the spill, leaving most of the work to Caroline. Her seat was still damp, and her remaining papers were haphazardly stacked. "Here," Caroline said, offering Zara her own blanket. Put this on your seat so you don't have to sit in wet clothes. Thank you, Zara replied, arranging the blanket. Before sitting down, she attempted to salvage what she could of her diagrams, but the damage was extensive. During the remainder of the meal service, Heather pointedly skipped Zara, not offering her a replacement meal or even a drink. When Zara finally requested a glass of water, Heather responded with a curt, "I'll get to it when I can," but never returned. Richard Bennett continued making snide comments just loud enough to be heard. Some people just don't know how to conduct themselves in premium cabins. That's why there are standards. Zara tried to focus on solutions rather than her growing anger. Without her presentation materials, her chances at the competition were severely compromised. She needed to contact Mr. Reynolds as soon as possible, to have him email the backup files to her, but that would have to wait until they landed. Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to air traffic congestion at San Francisco International, we've been informed of a 30-minute delay for our arrival. We apologize for any inconvenience." The news felt like another blow. Every minute of delay was another minute Zara wouldn't have to reconstruct her presentation before the competition. "Don't let them see you break," her mother's voice echoed, in her mind. Zara straightened her shoulders and began making notes on a napkin, determined to recreate as much of her presentation as possible from memory. She would not be defeated by coffee or by Heather Caldwell. After working for nearly an hour to reconstruct her presentation from memory, Zara decided it was time to formally report Heather's behavior. Caroline had witnessed the accidental coffee spill and could corroborate her account. Summoning her courage, Zara pressed the call button. Instead of Heather, a male flight attendant named Michael Torres responded. He appeared to be the senior cabin crew member, his uniform displaying additional stripes on the sleeve. "How can I help you?" he asked professionally. "I need to file a formal complaint about Flight Attendant Caldwell," Zara stated clearly. "She has repeatedly discriminated against me throughout this flight, culminating in deliberately spilling hot coffee on my personal belongings and ruining my presentation materials for a national competition." Michael's expression hardened slightly. "That's a very serious allegation, miss. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting an unfortunate accident?" "I witnessed it," Caroline interjected. "There was no turbulence. The coffee spill was deliberate." Michael looked between them, his loyalty clearly torn. "I've worked with Heather for 8 years. She's an exemplary flight attendant with an outstanding record." "And that makes her incapable of discrimination?" Zara challenged. "I didn't say that," Michael replied defensively. "But accidents happen all the time on flights. Coffee spills are common." "What about repeatedly asking only me to verify my right to sit in first class?" Zara pressed. "Is that also a common accident?" Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'll speak with Heather about the service issues, but regarding the spill, without clear evidence—" "I have evidence," Zara interrupted, pulling out her phone. "I've been recording audio since the first confrontation." It wasn't entirely true. She had stopped recording after Captain Miller's intervention. But Michael didn't know that. "Recording crew members is against airline policy," Michael said quickly. "So is racial discrimination," Zara countered. The conversation was going nowhere. Michael was determined to defend his colleague, and Zara realized with growing clarity how systemic the problem was. It wasn't just Heather. It was an entire structure designed to protect people like her while dismissing the experiences of people like Zara. Have you ever reached your breaking point after facing repeated discrimination? Comment number 1 if you think Zara should continue trying to work within the system, or number 2 if you think it's time for her to take more dramatic action. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up against injustice, and subscribe to see how Zara handles this critical moment. What would you do if you were in her position with your future on the line? As Michael walked away, promising a follow-up that Zara knew would never come, something inside her snapped. The culmination of every dismissal, every microaggression, every time she'd been told to be patient in the face of injustice, it all crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. She stood up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying throughout the first-class cabin. "I'd like everyone's attention, please." Conversations halted as passengers turned to look at her. Richard Bennett rolled his eyes dramatically. "Here we go again," he muttered. "Since boarding this flight, I have been systematically discriminated against by Flight Attendant Caldwell," Zara announced, her voice steady and clear. "I've been repeatedly asked to prove my right to sit in first class. I've been denied service provided to every other passenger. And most recently, my laptop and competition materials were deliberately destroyed when hot coffee was accidentally spilled on them." Heather pushed through from the galley. "Sit down immediately," she demanded. "You're disturbing the other passengers." "The only person who has been disturbing this flight is you," Zara replied, standing her ground, "and I'm tired of being silent." Passengers throughout the cabin were now fully engaged in the unfolding drama. Some had begun recording with their phones. "This is your final warning," Heather said, advancing toward Zara. "Sit down, or I'll have you restrained for interfering with a flight crew member." "Go ahead," Zara challenged. "Show everyone exactly who you are." Heather lunged forward, grabbing Zara's arm to force her back into her seat. Zara instinctively pulled away, and in the struggle, Heather's hand struck out, catching Zara across the face with enough force to split her lip. There was a collective gasp throughout the cabin. Blood trickled from Zara's lip, staining her white blouse with a stark crimson splash. For a moment, everyone froze, Heather in horror at what she'd done, passengers in shock at witnessing actual violence from a crew member. "You hit me," Zara said, touching her lip and looking at the blood on her fingers with disbelief. Caroline was immediately on her feet. "I saw it. She assaulted this girl." Other passengers began shouting as well, many holding up phones that had captured the entire incident. "Captain to the cabin immediately." Michael's voice came urgently over the intercom. Heather's face had drained of color as she realized the gravity of her action. "I didn't mean to." She was resisting. "We all saw what happened," another passenger called out. "She was standing and speaking. You attacked her." Captain Miller appeared from the cockpit, taking in the scene with a practiced eye, Zara with blood on her lip and shirt, Heather standing with a look of dawning horror, and a cabin full of agitated passengers, many recording everything. "Ms. Caldwell to the cockpit. Now," he ordered. Then, turning to Zara, "Are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm okay," Zara replied, her composure remarkable despite the circumstances. "But I want to press charges." As Heather was escorted to the cockpit, Zara stood in the aisle, bloodied but unbowed. In that moment, she embodied every person who had ever been pushed too far and finally said, "Enough." Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom, unusually grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a security situation in the cabin, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Denver. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing." A collective groan rose from the passengers, but no one directed their frustration at Zara. Instead, many looked at her with expressions ranging from sympathy to open support. The video of Heather striking her had already circulated throughout the plane via airdrop. Zara returned to her seat, accepting a clean napkin from Caroline to hold against her split lip. Her thoughts raced ahead to what would happen once they landed. Would she be arrested? Would anyone believe her version of events against that of a veteran flight attendant? "You should call your mother," Caroline suggested quietly, "before we land." Zara nodded, pulling out her phone as the plane began its descent. When Vanessa answered, Zara tried to keep her voice steady. "Mom, there's been an incident on the plane," she began. "What kind of incident? Are you okay?" Vanessa's voice sharpened with concern. "The flight attendant hit me," Zara said, the reality of those words still shocking. "She split my lip. The plane is making an emergency landing in Denver." "She what?" Vanessa's outrage was palpable even through the phone. "Put the captain on the phone right now." "I can't, Mom. He's flying the plane," Zara explained. "We're landing in about 20 minutes. "Listen to me carefully," Vanessa said, her voice shifting into crisis management mode. "I'm calling Jerome right now." Jerome Washington was Vanessa's brother, a civil rights attorney based in Chicago. "Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything. Wait for legal representation. What about the competition? Zara asked, reality crashing down around her. I'll never make it to San Francisco in time now. One problem at a time, Vanessa said, firmly. I'm booking a flight to Denver right now. Jerome will have a local attorney meet you at the airport. As Zara ended the call, she became aware of Richard Bennett speaking loudly into his own phone. It's ridiculous. This girl caused a scene, refused to comply with crew instructions, and now we're all being inconvenienced because she played the race card. Several passengers shot him disgusted looks. Actually, sir, a man in a business suit spoke up from across the aisle. I have the entire incident recorded. The flight attendant clearly assaulted this young woman without provocation. So do I, added another passenger holding up her phone. And I've already sent it to my daughter who's posting it online right now. Richard Bennett fell silent, but his glare at Zara spoke volumes. Caroline leaned over. Are you worried about what happens when we land? A little, Zara admitted. It's going to be my word against hers. It's going to be her word against about 30 witnesses and multiple videos, Caroline corrected. You're not alone in this. Outside the window, the sprawling landscape of Denver came into view as the plane descended through the clouds. Police vehicles with flashing lights were already visible on the tarmac, waiting for their arrival. Zara's stomach tightened with anxiety. Everything was spiraling so far from her carefully laid plans. The competition she'd worked toward for months was slipping away. Her project materials were destroyed. And now, instead of presenting her innovation to judges in San Francisco, she would be giving statements to police in Denver. I've ruined everything, she whispered. No, honey, Caroline said firmly. You stood up for yourself when no one else would. That's never ruining anything. The plane touched down with a slight bump, taxiing toward a remote area of the airport rather than a regular gate. Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed safely at Denver International Airport. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened until further instructions. Law enforcement officers will be boarding the aircraft momentarily. As the plane came to a complete stop, Zara could see the police vehicles approaching. She took a deep breath, touching the bracelet Tiana had given her for luck. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same dignity and strength she'd shown throughout this ordeal. She was her mother's daughter, after all. And Vanessa Washington had raised her to stand tall even when standing alone. The cabin fell silent as 3 police officers boarded the plane. They conferred briefly with Captain Miller at the front before making their way down the aisle toward the first-class section. To Zara's surprise, they approached her first. Ms. Washington? The lead officer asked, a middle-aged man with a stern expression. Yes, sir, she replied, sitting up straighter. We need you to come with us, he stated. We've received reports of an unruly passenger interfering with the flight. Crew. Caroline immediately protested. That's absolutely false. She was the victim here. Ma'am, please stay out of this, the officer responded. But before Zara could even rise from her seat, passengers throughout the cabin erupted in objection. She didn't do anything wrong. The flight attendant hit her. Check our videos. A young woman from several rows back pushed forward. Officer, I'm a law student at Columbia, and I have the entire incident recorded. The flight attendant clearly assaulted this minor without provocation. I have video too, another passenger called out. So do I. Suddenly, phones were being held up throughout the cabin, each displaying damning footage of Heather striking Zara. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared for this level of passenger involvement. The lead officer reviewed one of the videos, his expression growing more serious as he watched. Where is Flight Attendant Caldwell? He finally asked. In the cockpit, Captain Miller answered. I removed her from the cabin immediately after the incident. The second officer, a woman with a more compassionate demeanor, approached Zara. Are you all right? Do you need medical attention for your lip? I'm okay, Zara replied, but I'd like to file assault charges. Meanwhile, Heather had emerged from the cockpit, escorted by the third officer. When she saw the passengers holding up their phones, her confident demeanor faltered. These passengers are exaggerating, she insisted, to the lead officer. This young woman was causing a disruption. She refused to comply with safety instructions and became physically resistant when I attempted to seat her. That's not what happened, Caroline stated firmly. I was sitting right next to her the entire flight. This young lady was discriminated against from the moment she boarded. Richard Bennett stood up. Officer, if I may, I'm a platinum member with this airline and witnessed the entire situation. The flight attendant was simply doing her job in difficult circumstances. The female officer looked at him skeptically. Sir, did you witness the physical altercation? Well, yes, but... And did you see this young woman initiate any physical contact with the flight attendant? Bennett hesitated. Not exactly, but she was being provocative by standing up and addressing the cabin. Standing and speaking is not a crime, the officer replied coolly. Striking a passenger is. By now, news of the incident had spread throughout the airport. As the officers continued gathering statements and reviewing videos, airline representatives in corporate attire rushed onto the plane, their faces tight with concern. I'm Sandra Reeves, Vice President of Customer Experience, a woman in a tailored suit announced. We're taking this incident extremely seriously. Behind the airline executives, media personnel had gathered at the terminal windows, cameras pointed toward the plane. Somewhere in the chaos, the story had leaked to the press. Zara's phone buzzed with a text from Tiana. OMG, you're trending. Want justice for Zara is all over Twitter. Indeed, the videos of the confrontation had spread across social media with astonishing speed. Within an hour of landing, the incident had gone viral, with thousands sharing the footage and commenting on the blatant discrimination Zara had faced. Inside the terminal, as statements were being taken, Zara sat in a private airline lounge, an ice pack pressed to her lip. The airline executives had moved quickly to separate her from the media circus forming outside. A local attorney sent by say, her uncle Jerome had arrived and was sitting beside her, reviewing the airline's hastily prepared statement. This is a PR nightmare for them, the attorney, Ms. Daniels, explained. They're offering a private jet to get you to San Francisco in time for your competition, full compensation for your damaged property, and a public apology. Zara looked up in surprise. Really? They know they're facing a potential lawsuit. That could cost them millions, Ms. Daniels replied frankly. Not to mention the damage to their reputation. Justice for Zara is the #1 trending topic nationally right now. Outside the lounge windows, Zara could see Heather being escorted through the terminal by police officers. The flight attendant's career was effectively over, terminated by the airline within hours of landing and facing criminal assault charges. The showdown had reached its conclusion, but for Zara, the journey was far from over. As airline representatives scrambled to make arrangements for her continued travel to San Francisco, she sat quietly, processing the whirlwind of events that had transformed what should have been a routine flight into a national conversation about race, privilege, and the courage to stand against injustice. 3 hours after the emergency landing in Denver, Zara found herself aboard a luxurious private jet arranged by the airline. Her mother had arrived on the first available flight from Atlanta and sat beside her, holding her hand as the sleek aircraft cut through the clouds toward San Francisco. I still can't believe all this, Zara said, scrolling through the flood of supportive messages on her phone. The hashtag, #JusticeForZara, had generated millions of interactions, with people around the country sharing their own experiences of discrimination on flights. I can, Vanessa replied, her voice a mixture of pride and lingering anger. You've always been extraordinary, Zara. The world is just finally seeing what I've always known. The airline's damage control had been swift and comprehensive. Beyond the private jet, they had issued a public apology, announced a comprehensive review of their diversity training protocols, and arranged for Zara's damaged laptop to be replaced with a top-of-the-line model delivered directly to her hotel in San Francisco. Most importantly, Mr. Reynolds had sent the backup files of her presentation, and airline staff had printed fresh copies of her prototype diagrams using the originals Zara had emailed to herself months earlier. Ms. Washington, the flight attendant on the private jet approached, nothing like Heather in her warm demeanor. We'll be landing in 20 minutes. A car is waiting to take you directly to the convention center." Zara nodded her thanks, taking a deep breath as she reviewed her notes one final time. Despite everything, she had made it. The competition was still within reach. As promised, a luxury car whisked Zara and her mother from the airport to the convention center, where the National Youth Science Innovation Competition was already underway. News of Zara's ordeal had preceded her. The event organizers greeted her with expressions of concern and admiration. "We've adjusted the schedule," the head judge informed her. "You'll present last, giving you time to prepare." The convention hall was packed with spectators, journalists, and other competitors. As Zara made her way to the preparation area, whispers and glances followed her. Some of the other young scientists approached to express their support. "What you did was amazing," one girl told her. "You stood up for all of us." In the moments before her presentation, Zara received a video call from Tiana. "Girl, you're famous," Tiana exclaimed. "Everyone at school is talking about you. Mr. Reynolds has the whole science department watching the live stream of the competition." The knowledge that her community was watching gave Zara an extra boost of confidence. When her name was finally called, she walked onto the stage with her head held high, the audience erupting into applause before she'd even begun. Standing before the judges and hundreds of spectators, Zara took a moment to absorb the significance of her presence there. Her lip was still slightly swollen, a visible reminder of what she had endured to reach this moment. "My name is Zara Washington," she began, her voice clear and strong. "And today I want to present a medical diagnostic device designed specifically for rural communities with limited healthcare access." As she launched into her presentation, Zara found herself speaking with a new level of passion and purpose. She wove her personal experience into the narrative, explaining how her device could help address systemic inequities in healthcare, just as she had addressed systemic discrimination on that flight. "Access should never be determined by what someone looks like or where they come from," she stated, her words resonating far beyond the intended context of rural healthcare. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and receive the services they are entitled to." When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. The judges conferred briefly before announcing their decision, a perfect score across all categories. Zara Washington had won the National Youth Science Innovation Competition. In the days that followed, Zara's victory expanded far beyond the competition itself. The president of Princeton University personally called to reaffirm her scholarship and offer an additional stipend for her studies. Major medical technology companies expressed interest in developing her prototype. And perhaps most significantly, she received an invitation to testify before a congressional hearing on discrimination in the airline industry. 6 months later, Zara stood before members of Congress, her poised testimony capturing the attention of lawmakers and the public alike. "What happened to me on that flight happens to people of color every day, in ways both large and small," she stated. "The difference is that mine was captured on video and went viral. But everyday discrimination rarely makes headlines, even though its impact is just as real and just as damaging." Her testimony helped shape new legislation requiring enhanced anti-discrimination training for all airline personnel and establishing clearer protocols for addressing passenger complaints. On a warm August day, as summer drew to a close, Zara boarded another first-class flight, this time to New Jersey to begin her freshman year at Princeton. As she approached her seat, the flight attendant smiled with genuine warmth. "Ms. Washington, welcome aboard," she said. "It's an honor to have you on our flight today." The recognition wasn't just because Zara was now a recognizable figure. It was because every flight attendant in the country had completed the new training program developed in the wake of her experience, a program officially named the Washington Protocol. As the plane taxied down the runway, Zara gazed out the window at the Atlanta skyline growing smaller below. She touched the bracelet Tiana had given her that fateful day, still wrapped around her wrist as a reminder of how far she had come. Sometimes justice does come at 35,000 feet above ground. But more often, it comes from the courage of one person who refuses to accept discrimination as the price of admission to a world that should belong equally to everyone. What would you have done in Zara's situation? Have you ever stood up against discrimination and found unexpected support? Comment below with your own experiences or thoughts on this story. Don't forget to like this video if Zara's courage inspired you. Subscribe for more powerful true stories of justice and resilience, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself can lead to change that impacts countless others. Thank you for watching, and remember, 1. Voice can transform an entire system when that voice refuses to be silenced. Zara's story teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both courage and strategy. By documenting her experience, gathering allies, and refusing to back down, she transformed a personal injustice into systemic change. Her journey reminds us that silence perpetuates discrimination, while speaking up, even at great personal risk, can create ripples far beyond one incident. The most powerful weapon against prejudice is evidence. When Zara recorded her interactions and other passengers captured video, denial became impossible. This turned individual witnesses into a community of advocates. Caroline's evolution shows that allies may emerge from unexpected places when we stand our ground with dignity. True justice isn't just about personal vindication, but creating lasting change. Zara's testimony leading to the Washington Protocol ensures her experience protects countless others. Her story demonstrates that sometimes the most significant victories come after moments of greatest adversity. When we refuse to accept discrimination as normal, even when systems are designed to make us doubt ourselves.